Into it in a spring back on the rails. Turmoil's not there yet, neither Disco Mo, but in front is Ben Talk. Here's Head On out wide and Policy. Flying Policy's got up from Head On right on the line.
I've spent 35 years working with horses, so it's only natural that my photography has moved towards them. I didn't plan to become an equine photographer, but I didn't plan a lot of things. Having come up through Pony Club before working in the Victorian High Country, herding cattle and chasing brumbies, I went on to be a competitive horse trials rider and instructor, amongst other equine-related pursuits. When I took up photography, it was only a matter of time before I ended up pointing the lens at horses. For this project, I've put together a collection of fine art images that I have captured during my regular photography at the horse racing in my region. Luckily for me, and many others involved in the industry, the sport of horse racing has continued throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. It is very much modified and there are no spectators, which has made it somewhat eerie at what would normally be larger meetings. In my images, I have attempted to introduce a sense of motion, speed and the strength of the horse into still images. I have selected what I deem to be my best images taken during the course of study and compiled them into a book titled The Art of Racing. The book is just over 100 pages and contains 73 images accompanied by various equine-related quotes that can be attributed to many horsemen and women over the centuries. Some of the images stand alone, others create a series within the collection, and I have attempted to bring these all together into a cohesive group. Whilst my aim with the series has been to focus on the panning, shutter drag images that I have worked hard on and come to appreciate, there are a few that didn't come into this class but were just too appealing to leave out, such as the image of jockey Michaela Weir, which appears on page 39. Most of the images are black and white. I've discovered that my shooting technique works well with a black and white process. I feel a lack of colour brings a sense of simplicity to the images and removes the confusion that colour can introduce. A couple of the images are in colour. They just felt better in colour than in black and white. Both the images are quite warm and shot when the sun was low, which I think makes the colour processing work. My processing is usually quite simple, to the point where I have created a shutter drag preset in Lightroom. This boosts the shadows and clarity and suppresses the highlights and contrast. Bringing the book together proved to be more involved than I imagined. It's not until you start to look at the details that you realise how much work it is. Things like ISBNs and copyright issues all needed to be researched and understood. Most images stand alone, and in order to present them with a blank page opposite, I have made use of quotes that have an equine theme. Some of the quotes are from contemporary authors, such as Olympic equestrian show jumper George Morris and equine trainer Pat Pirelli. The opening quote from Xenophon's The Art of Horsemanship dates back over 2,300 years and is still relevant to today's equestrian athletes. This shows how little horsemanship has had the need to change throughout the millennia. Originally, my cover design was monochromatic, reflecting the theme that dominates most of the images, but upon review I elected to use a colour image in order to create a more appealing package. Another consideration I had to make was that of binding. I have chosen to use a lay flat style, as some of the images are required to appear across the 2 pages of a spread. I did toy with the idea of changing the layout to avoid this, but I just couldn't find one that appealed to me, instead electing for the slightly higher production cost of lay flat binding. To complement the book, I have chosen 3 images to print and mount for presentation on a gallery wall. I have elected to use 3 images as the rule of threes encourages engagement by the audience when compared to a single image. The first image is one of Jake Hull riding St Anton and appears across pages 106 and 107 of The Art of Racing. The sharpness of both the horses' and jockeys' heads in this image gives a sense of unity between the two. The pale background appears to balance well with the dark of the horse, and the harlequin pattern of the jockey's silks adds pop to the image. The horse's pose, with arched neck, demonstrates strength and physical engagement, whilst the limb position and blur give a sense of motion. The second image of Sammy Clenton on board Articus appears on page 19 of The Art of Racing. The sharpness of the jockey's face is what makes this image so compelling. The balance obtained between the relative size of the horse and rider when compared to the negative space of the background makes this a strong image which encourages the viewer's eye to move across the image to the subject. This image was captured late in the day at the Tamworth track, where the sun sets behind the riders as they travel along the home straight. This has given a pleasing light that highlights the muscular nature of the horse. The last of the three images is of Daniel Northey riding Voyagers and appears on page 17 of the book. Again, the juxtaposed background and subject create a nice balance. Once more we see clarity in the image that encompasses both the horse's head and the rider's, creating a sense of unity. Likewise, the horse's pose, once again, gives a sense of power and engagement. The last aspect of this image that appeals to me is the sense of anonymity created by not seeing the faces of either subject. It is rare to get a nice image of a rider once the horse has passed the camera, but this image seems to ignore that fact. That concludes the presentation for my book and print series, The Art of Racing.